The desert wind howled across the Texas frontier as Samuel Hawkins secured the last wooden plank on his barn door. His small ranch sat at the edge of Apache territory, a dangerous place for any man to call home, but Samuel had nowhere else to go. He had lost everything in the war, and this dusty piece of land was his only chance at a fresh start. The sun was setting behind the distant mountains when Samuel heard the sound. It was faint at first, like the rustling of dried leaves. But his years as a soldier had taught him to recognize the footsteps of people trying to move quietly. He stood perfectly still, his hand moving slowly toward the rifle that leaned against the barn wall. Two figures emerged from the shadows of the cottonwood trees near his water well. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. They were Apache women, tall and strong. Moving with the grace of mountain lions, their dark hair hung long and loose, and their buckskin dresses were covered in dust from traveling. These were not ordinary women. They stood nearly as tall as Samuel himself, and their eyes held the fierce intelligence of survivors. The rancher's mind raced with possibilities. Apache raiding parties had been attacking settlers for months, burning homesteads and driving off cattle. Everyone said the Apache could not be trusted, that they would smile at you one moment and put a knife in your back the next. Samuel had never believed all the stories, but now, standing alone on his property with two Apache women approaching, fear gripped his heart. The taller of the two women raised her hand in a gesture of peace. She spoke in broken English, her voice rough like gravel. "Water," she said simply, pointing to the well. "We need water." Samuel studied them carefully. Their lips were cracked and bleeding. Their faces showed the exhaustion of people who had been walking for days without rest. Whatever their purpose here, they were desperate. The rancher knew that desperate people were dangerous people. But he also knew what it meant to be thirsty in the desert. He nodded slowly and gestured toward the well. "Take what you need," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. The women moved forward, drinking deeply from the bucket. Their eyes never left Samuel, watching him with the wariness of wild animals as darkness fell. The shorter woman spoke to her companion in their own language. Samuel could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. They were arguing about something. The taller woman shook her head firmly, but the other one kept insisting, pointing at the barn and then at Samuel. "We stay tonight," the taller woman finally said to Samuel in English. It was not a request, it was a statement. "Tomorrow we go." Samuel felt his stomach tighten. Having Apache women on his property overnight was asking for trouble. If other settlers saw them, they would assume he was helping the enemy. If Apache warriors came looking for these women, they might kill him just for being in the way. But what choice did he have? He could not send them back into the desert at night. Even if he wanted to. "The barn," Samuel said, pointing. "You can sleep there. I will be in the house." He wanted them to know he would be watching, that he did not trust them completely. The women nodded and moved toward the barn. Samuel watched them disappear into the darkness. Then he walked slowly back to his small cabin. His mind was troubled as he lit the oil lamp and sat at his rough wooden table. Something about the women's arrival felt wrong. Too convenient. Why had they come to his ranch specifically? There were other homesteads with wells, closer to the Apache lands. He decided he would not sleep that night. He would pretend to rest. But he would keep his ears open and his rifle close. If these women were planning something, he would be ready. Samuel lay down on his bed, fully clothed, his boots still on his feet. He closed his eyes, but kept his breathing slow and steady, the way a sleeping man would breathe through the thin walls of his cabin. He could hear the women moving around in the barn, talking quietly in their own language. Hours passed, and Samuel's body ached from lying so still. The moon rose high in the sky, casting silver light through his window. Then he heard it, the sound of the barn door creaking open. Footsteps moving toward his cabin, soft and careful. The rancher's heart began to pound, but he forced himself to remain motionless. His hand rested near his rifle, hidden under the blanket. The footsteps stopped just outside his door. Then he heard the women's voices. Speaking in urgent whispers, this was it, Samuel thought. This was the moment that would determine if he lived or died. He kept his eyes closed and listened as the Apache sisters began to reveal their true plan. Samuel lay motionless on his bed, every muscle in his body tense as wire. The footsteps outside his door had stopped, but he could hear the soft breathing of the two Apache sisters just beyond the wooden planks. His finger rested lightly on the trigger of his rifle. Hidden beneath the blanket, one wrong move, and he would have to defend himself. The taller woman's voice came through the door. Barely more than a whisper, she was speaking in her native tongue, and Samuel strained to catch any word he might recognize. He had picked up a few Apache phrases over the years from traders and scouts, but not enough to understand a full conversation. All he could do was listen to the tone and rhythm of their words. The shorter sister responded, her voice sharper and more insistent. Samuel could hear tension between them, an argument brewing in hushed tones. Whatever they were discussing, they did not agree about it. The rancher's mind raced through possibilities. Were they deciding whether to kill him? Were they planning to steal his horses and supplies? Or was something else happening here that he could not yet understand? Minutes passed like hours. Samuel kept his breathing slow and deep, mimicking the sounds of a man lost in sleep. It was a skill he had learned during the war, when staying alive often meant appearing vulnerable while remaining completely alert. He had fooled enemy sentries this way, and now he hoped to fool these Apache women. The door to his cabin creaked open slowly. Samuel's heart hammered against his ribs. But he did not move. Through his barely opened eyelids, he could see the moonlight streaming through the doorway, and the silhouettes of the two women standing at the threshold. They were looking at him, studying him. Trying to determine if he was truly asleep, the taller woman stepped inside first. Moving with the silent grace of a hunter, her sister followed close behind. They stood at the foot of Samuel's bed, and he could feel their eyes on him. Examining every detail, he forced himself to remain still, to keep his face relaxed, to show no sign of the fear coursing through his veins. "He sleeps," the taller woman finally whispered in English, confirming to her sister that the rancher appeared unconscious. "We can speak freely now." Samuel's pulse quickened. They were going to talk in English, which meant they wanted to plan something that required precision, something they could not risk misunderstanding in their own language. He continued his performance, letting out a soft snore to make his sleeping act more convincing. The shorter sister moved closer to the bed, so close that Samuel could smell the desert dust on her clothes. "Are you certain this is the right man?" she asked in heavily accented English. "The trader said the rancher with the scar would help us. This man has a scar." "But how do we know he is the one?" Samuel's mind reeled. What traitor, what scar were they talking about? He had a scar on his left cheek from a Confederate saber. But how would any Apache trader know about that? And why would anyone tell these women that he would help them? The taller woman knelt beside the bed, studying Samuel's face in the moonlight. "The scar matches," she said quietly, "and this is the only ranch in this area with a man living alone. The trader said this rancher was different from the others, that he did not hate our people, that he had honor." The shorter sister made a sound of doubt. "The trader also said the blue coats had honor, and they massacred our village while we slept. How can we trust any white man, especially with something this important, because we have no choice?" the taller woman replied, her voice heavy with emotion. "Our brother will die if we do not get medicine. The fort will not trade with us. The other settlers shoot at us on sight. This rancher is our only hope. Samuel felt his understanding shift like sand beneath his feet. These women were not here to attack him. They were here because they were desperate. Because someone had told them he might help them save their brother's life. But who was this traitor, and why had he sent them to Samuel's ranch? The shorter sister walked to the window, looking out at the darkness. "If he refuses to help us, what then?" she asked. "Do we take the medicine by force? Do we threaten him?" "No," the taller woman said firmly, standing up from beside the bed. "If he refuses, we leave peacefully. We find another way. Or our brother joins our ancestors. But we do not become the monsters that the white settlers believe we are." Samuel heard the pain in her voice, the resignation of someone who had already lost too much. He wanted to open his eyes, to tell them he would help. But something held him back. He needed to hear more, to understand the full situation before revealing that he had been awake all along. The two sisters moved toward the door, preparing to return to the barn. But the shorter one stopped and turned back, looking at Samuel's still form one more time. "What if the traitor lied?" she said softly. "What if this man wakes tomorrow and kills us both?" The taller woman placed her hand on her sister's shoulder. "Then we die trying to save our brother," she said simply. "It is a good way to die." They left the cabin as quietly as they had entered. Pulling the door closed behind them, Samuel lay in the darkness, his mind spinning with everything he had heard. These women were not his enemies. They were desperate sisters trying to save their brother. And somehow he had been chosen as their only hope. But the mystery remained. Who was this traitor who had sent them? And what medicine did they need so urgently? Samuel knew he should be cautious, that this could still be an elaborate trap, but his instincts told him otherwise. The emotion in the taller woman's voice had been real, the fear and love unmistakable. As the first light of dawn began to break through his window, Samuel finally allowed himself to relax. He had survived the night. And now he faced a choice that would define what kind of man he truly was. Would he help these Apache sisters, risking everything he had rebuilt? Or would he send them away and live with the knowledge that he had let an innocent man die? The rancher closed his eyes for real this time, knowing that when morning came, he would have to make the most important decision of his life. The morning sun broke over the horizon like a crack in the world, painting Samuel's small ranch in shades of gold and amber. He had not slept at all, his mind too busy replaying the conversation he had overheard. The Apache sisters needed medicine for their dying brother, and somehow a mysterious traitor had pointed them to his door. Samuel rose from his bed and splashed cold water on his face from the basin on his table. He looked at himself in the small mirror hanging on the wall, at the scar running down his left cheek. That scar had been a curse for years, a reminder of how close he had come to death in the war. Now it seemed that same scar might be the reason these women had sought him out. He strapped on his gun belt and walked outside. The morning air was cool and fresh. Carrying the smell of sage and dry earth, the barn door was closed. But Samuel could see thin trails of smoke rising from the gaps in the wooden planks. The sisters had started a small fire inside, probably to warm themselves after the cold desert night. Samuel approached the barn slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel. He knocked on the door 3 times, loud enough to announce his presence. There was a moment of silence, then the sound of movement inside. The door swung open, and the taller Apache woman stood before him, her dark eyes meeting his without fear. "Good morning," Samuel said, keeping his voice calm and neutral. "I thought you might be hungry. I can make breakfast." The woman studied him for a long moment, as if trying to read his intentions. "You are kind," she said finally. "We accept." The shorter sister appeared behind her, watching Samuel with obvious suspicion. Her hand rested near the knife at her belt, ready to draw it if he made any threatening move. Samuel understood her caution. In this land, Trust was a luxury that could get you killed. They walked to the cabin together, the sisters moving with a silent grace that seemed natural to them. Samuel noticed how they positioned themselves, always keeping him in sight, always maintaining a path to escape if needed. These were women who had survived in a dangerous world by never letting their guard down. Inside the cabin, Samuel prepared a simple meal of cornbread, bacon, and coffee. The sisters sat at his table, their eyes taking in every detail of his small home. They noted the single plate and cup, the absence of any woman's belongings, the worn Bible on the shelf. Samuel knew they were gathering information about him, trying to determine what kind of man he really was. As they ate, the taller woman finally spoke. "My name is Ayanna," she said, gesturing to herself. Then she pointed to her sister. "This is Kiona." "We are grateful for your hospitality," Samuel nodded. "My name is Samuel Hawkins. This ranch is not much, but you are welcome here." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I heard you talking last night." Both women froze, their bodies tensing like coiled springs. Kiona's hand moved toward her knife, but Ayanna raised her hand to stop her. "What did you hear?" Ayanna asked, her voice low and dangerous. Samuel met her gaze directly. "I heard that your brother is sick, that you need medicine, and that a traitor sent you to me." He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "What I do not understand is why. I am just a rancher. I have no medicine, no connection to doctors or traders." Ayanna and Kiona exchanged glances, having a silent conversation that Samuel could not interpret. Finally, Ayanna spoke. "The trader's name was Diego Santos. He said he knew you from the war. He said you were a man who kept his word. Even when it cost you everything." The name hit Samuel like a punch to the chest. Diego Santos. He had not heard that name in 3 years. Diego had been a scout during the war, a half-Mexican, half-Apache man who moved between worlds with ease. Samuel had saved Diego's life once, pulling him from a burning building after a Confederate attack. Diego had promised he would repay the debt someday. "Diego is alive," Samuel said, more to himself than to the women. "I thought he died in the fire." "He lived," Ayanna confirmed. "He lives in the mountains now, trading between our people and the towns. When our brother fell sick, when no white doctor would help us, we went to Diego. He said only one white man could be trusted, one man who would help Apache people without asking for payment. He described your scar and told us where to find you." Samuel sat back in his chair, understanding beginning to dawn. Diego had sent these women to him because he knew Samuel would help. Because 3 years ago, Samuel had risked his own life to save a half-Apache scout that everyone else had written off as expendable. That single act of compassion had created a debt, and now Diego was calling it in. "What medicine does your brother need?" Samuel asked. Kiona spoke for the first time since entering the cabin, her English rough but clear. "Quinine," she said. "He has the shaking fever, the one that comes from bad water. Without quinine, he will die within days." Samuel knew the fever she described, malaria. It was common in the low valleys where water pooled and mosquitoes bred. Quinine was the only effective treatment, but it was expensive and hard to get. Most ranchers and settlers hoarded what they had, and no one would sell it to Apache people, not with tensions so high between the tribes and the settlers. "The nearest town with quinine is Dry Creek," Samuel said slowly. "It is a day's ride from here, and they will not sell to you. They would shoot you on sight." "We know," Ayanna said, her voice heavy with resignation. "That is why Diego sent us to you. He said you could buy the medicine without questions, that you could bring it to our brother." Samuel understood the full weight of what they were asking now. If he rode to Dry Creek and bought quinine, then rode into Apache territory to deliver it, he would be marked as a traitor by every settler in the region. His ranch would be burned, his livestock stolen. He might even be hanged, but if he refused, an innocent man would die. And Samuel would have to live with the knowledge that he had let it happen. He looked at the two sisters, at the desperate hope barely contained behind their fierce exteriors. These were not raiders or killers. They were women trying to save their brother's life. Just as Samuel had once tried to save Diego's. "If I do this," Samuel said carefully, "if I bring medicine to your brother, what happens afterward? Will your people leave my ranch alone? Will they tell other tribes that I helped you?" Ayanna leaned forward, her eyes intense. "My brother is the son of our chief," she said. "If you save his life, our entire tribe will owe you a debt. No Apache warrior will touch your land, your animals, or your life. You will have the protection of the Mescalero people." It was a powerful promise. But Samuel knew it came with equal risk. Protection from one tribe might mean becoming an enemy of another. And there was still the problem of his fellow settlers. Who would see any alliance with Apache people as betrayal? Samuel stood and walked to the window. Looking out at the land he had worked so hard to build, everything he owned was here. This small cabin, a few acres of dry ground. Some cattle and horses, it was not much, but it was his. The only thing he had left after the war took everything else. But as he stood there, he realized something. This land meant nothing if he had to become the kind of man who let others die to protect it. He had seen too much death in the war, too much suffering caused by men who chose safety over compassion. He would not become one of them. "I will go to Dry Creek today," Samuel said. Turning back to face the sisters, "I will buy the quinine and bring it to your brother. But you must guide me safely to your camp and back." "I cannot do this alone." Relief flooded across both women's faces. Ayanna stood and placed her hand over her heart in a gesture of respect. "You have our word," she said. "We will protect you with our lives." "Just as you are now protecting our brother with yours," Samuel nodded, knowing that he had just made a decision that would change everything. For better or worse, his quiet life as a forgotten rancher was over. The journey to Dry Creek began in the early afternoon, with Samuel riding his bay horse and the two Apache sisters following on foot. They moved with incredible speed and stamina, keeping pace with his horse without showing any signs of exhaustion. Samuel had heard stories about Apache warriors who could run 50 miles in a day. But seeing the sisters' endurance firsthand gave him new respect for their people's abilities. The land between Samuel's ranch and Dry Creek was harsh and unforgiving, filled with rocky outcrops, deep ravines, and stands of mesquite trees that offered little shade from the burning sun. Samuel knew this territory well, but he also knew that Apache scouts could be watching from any high point, invisible against the landscape. If Ayanna and Kiona's tribe did not know about this mission, their presence together might be misunderstood. "How far is your brother's camp from Dry Creek?" Samuel asked, breaking the silence that had settled over them. Ayanna jogged alongside his horse, barely breathing hard. "Half a day's ride to the east," she said. "In the mountain valley where the springs flow, it is hidden from the settlers. But our people have lived there for generations." Samuel nodded, calculating the time in his head. If he could buy the quinine in Dry Creek without incident, they could reach the Apache camp by tomorrow morning, but that was a big if. Dry Creek was a rough town filled with former soldiers, bounty hunters, and settlers who hated Apache people with a passion that bordered on madness. One wrong word, one suspicious glance, and the whole plan could fall apart. "When we get close to the town," Samuel said carefully, "you will need to hide if anyone sees you with me. They will ask questions I cannot answer." Kiona spoke up, her voice sharp with suspicion. "How do we know you will not ride into that town and bring back soldiers instead of medicine? How do we know this is not a trap?" It was a fair question, Samuel realized. These women were putting their lives in his hands based on nothing more than the word of a trader they had met once. and a promise from a white man they had known for less than a day. In their position, Samuel would be suspicious too. "You have no reason to trust me," Samuel admitted, "just as I have no reason to trust that your tribe will not kill me the moment I deliver the medicine. But Diego Santos trusted me enough to send you to my door. And you trusted him enough to come, sometimes in this world. Trust is all we have." Ayanna looked at him with those dark, intelligent eyes, and Samuel felt like she was reading his soul. "Diego said you saved his life when no one else would," she said. "He said you carried him from a burning building while Confederate soldiers were shooting at you. He said you did this even though you knew he was half Apache. Even though your own men called you a fool." Samuel felt the old memories rising up. The smoke and flames, the screaming of wounded men. Diego's unconscious body heavy in his arms. "Diego was a good scout," Samuel said quietly. "He did not deserve to die in that fire." "No man does. That is why we trust you," Ayanna said simply, "because you see people. Not just enemies." They continued in silence for another hour, the sun beating down mercilessly. Samuel offered the sisters water from his canteen, but they refused, saying they had trained themselves to go without water for long periods. It was another reminder of how different their worlds were, and how much they had to adapt to survive in this harsh land. As they approached the outskirts of Dry Creek, Samuel raised his hand to signal a halt. The town was visible in the distance. A collection of wooden buildings clustered around a main street. Dust rose from the roads where horses and wagons moved back and forth. From here, Samuel could see the saloon, the general store, and the small office where the town marshal kept order. "There is a canyon about a mile to the south," Samuel said, pointing. "You can wait there while I go into town. I will buy the quinine and return before sunset." Ayanna studied the town with the eyes of a hunter, noting the positions of buildings, the routes of escape, the places where danger might hide if you do not return by sunset, she said. "We will assume you have betrayed us. We will return to our people and tell them that white men cannot be trusted." "Not even the one with the scar." "Fair enough," Samuel replied, understanding that this was both a warning and a promise. Kiona stepped closer to Samuel's horse, her hand resting on the knife at her belt. "My brother's name is Nahil," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "He is 17 summers old. He wants to be a warrior like our father. But first he must survive this sickness when you ride into that town. Remember that you are not just buying medicine. You are buying the life of a young man who has never harmed you, who has dreams and a family that loves him." The words hit Samuel harder than any threat could have. This was not about politics or land disputes or the bitter war between settlers and Apache people. This was about a sick boy who deserved a chance to live. Samuel thought about all the young men he had seen die in the war. Boys with dreams and families gone forever because of hatred and violence. "I will remember," Samuel promised. "I will bring back the medicine." The sisters moved off toward the canyon, disappearing into the landscape with the ease of shadows fading at noon. Samuel watched them go, then turned his horse toward Dry Creek. His heart was heavy with the weight of what he was about to do. The main street of Dry Creek was busy with afternoon traffic when Samuel rode in. He tied his horse to the hitching post outside the general store and paused to survey the town. Several men stood outside the saloon, drinking and talking in the shade. A woman in a bonnet walked past with a basket of supplies. Two children chased each other down the street. Laughing, it all looked normal, peaceful even. But Samuel knew that beneath this calm surface lay currents of fear and hatred. Just last month, a settler family had been killed in an Apache raid 20 miles north. The town was on edge, ready to strike at any threat, real or imagined. Samuel entered the general store, the bell above the door ringing to announce his arrival. The store owner, a heavy-set man named Thornton. looked up from behind the counter. "Samuel Hawkins," Thornton said, surprise in his voice. "I have not seen you in town for months. What brings you here?" "I need to buy some supplies," Samuel said, trying to keep his voice casual. "And I need quinine." "Enough for a week's treatment." Thornton's eyes narrowed. "Quinine," he repeated slowly. "That is expensive medicine, Samuel." "You got the fever?" "No," Samuel said quickly. "But I want to have it on hand, just in case. You know how it is out at my ranch. A man gets sick, and there is no one around to help." The store owner studied him for a long moment, and Samuel felt sweat trickling down his back despite the coolness inside the store. Finally, Thornton nodded. "I suppose that makes sense," he said. "I will get you what I have, but it will not be cheap," as Thornton disappeared into the back room to fetch the medicine. Samuel heard voices outside the store. Two men were talking, their words drifting through the open window. "I am telling you. I saw Apache signs up near Hawks Ridge yesterday," one man said. "Fresh tracks, maybe 2 or 3 of them. They are getting bold, coming this close to town." Samuel's blood ran cold. Were they talking about Ayanna and Kiona? Had someone already spotted them? He forced himself to remain calm, to show no reaction. Thornton returned with a small bottle of quinine tablets. "This should be enough for what you need," he said, naming a price that made Samuel wince. It was almost all the money he had saved over the past 6 months. But he handed over the coins without complaint. As Samuel turned to leave, Thornton called after him. "You be careful out there, Samuel. There are Apache around, and they are not friendly. You see any sign of them? You ride straight back here and tell Marshal Briggs. We will form a hunting party." Samuel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He walked out of the store with the precious bottle of quinine in his pocket, mounted his horse, and rode slowly out of town. Every second felt like an hour. Every glance from a townsperson felt like an accusation. Only when he was clear of the town and riding hard toward the canyon did Samuel allow himself to breathe freely. He had the medicine. The first test had been passed. But the real test was still ahead. Riding into Apache territory and trusting that Ayanna and Kiona would keep their promise to protect him. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Samuel reached the canyon where the sisters waited. They emerged from the shadows like ghosts, their eyes immediately going to the pocket where Samuel kept the quinine. "You came back," Ayanna said, and Samuel heard the relief in her voice. "I gave you my word," Samuel replied. "Now you must keep yours. Take me to your brother." The journey into Apache territory began as the sun touched the horizon, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and deep purple. Samuel followed Ayanna and Kiona through terrain that grew increasingly rugged and wild. They moved through narrow canyons where the walls rose high on either side, across dry creek beds filled with smooth stones, and up rocky slopes where one wrong step could send horse and rider tumbling down. As darkness fell, the sisters led Samuel to a small clearing where they decided to make camp for the night. It would be too dangerous to approach the Apache village in darkness, Ayanna explained. The warriors guarding the camp would shoot first and ask questions later if they heard someone approaching after sunset. Samuel built a small fire while the sisters disappeared into the surrounding brush to scout the area. When they returned, Kiona carried 2 rabbits that she had caught and killed with her bare hands. Samuel watched in amazement as she prepared the animals with a knife. Working quickly and efficiently in the firelight, they ate in silence, the tension of the day's events settling over them like a heavy blanket. Samuel's mind kept returning to the bottle of quinine in his pocket. Such a small thing, he thought, yet it held the power of life and death. He wondered about Noel, the 17-year-old boy whose life depended on whether Samuel had made the right choice. "Tell me about your brother," Samuel said finally, breaking the silence. "What kind of person is he?" Ayanna looked up from the fire. her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "Niall is gentle," she said softly. "Too gentle for the life he was born into. He does not want to be a warrior. He wants to be a storyteller, to preserve the history of our people through words and memory." She paused, her voice catching. "But our father is the chief, and a chief's son must be strong, must fight, must lead," Kiona added. "When Noal got sick, some of the warriors said it was because he did not have the heart of a fighter, that the spirits were punishing him for his weakness." Her voice was bitter. "But he is not weak. He is brave in ways that warriors cannot understand. It takes courage to be different, to want peace when everyone around you wants war." Samuel understood more than they knew. He had seen the same thing during the war. Young men forced to fight when their hearts wanted something else. He had watched gentle souls turn hard or break under the pressure of violence. "If he survives this sickness," Samuel asked, "what will happen to him?" "Our father will try to make him into a warrior," Iana said. "But if Nail lives, I think he will find his own path. He is stubborn like our mother was. Once he sets his mind to something, nothing can change it." A sad smile crossed her face. "Our mother died 2 years ago. She understood Noel. She protected him from our father's anger. Now that duty falls to Kiona and me." The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up into the night sky. Samuel lay back and looked at the stars, the same stars that had watched over him during countless nights in the war, during the lonely years building his ranch, during all the times he had wondered if his life had any meaning beyond simple survival. "Diego Santos saved my life once," Samuel said quietly, not sure why he was sharing this. "After the war ended, I had nothing. No family, no home, no purpose. I was going to end my own life. I had the gun loaded and ready." He paused, remembering that dark moment. "Diego found me. He talked to me for hours, reminded me that surviving when others died meant something, that I had a duty to live well since so many others could not." Iana and Kiona listened without interrupting, their faces serious in the firelight. "Diego told me to go west, to find land and build something new," Samuel continued. "He said that every person who chooses life over death, peace over violence, is a small victory against all the darkness in the world." Samuel looked at the sisters. "That is why I agreed to help you, not because I owe Diego a debt, but because your brother deserves the same chance I got, the chance to choose his own path." Kiona's face softened for the first time since Samuel had met her. "You are not like the other white men," she said. "Most of them see us as animals, things to be hunted and killed. They do not see that we love our families, that we fear death, that we want the same things they want: safety, food, a future for our children. I have seen too much death to think of any person as less than human." Samuel replied, "War teaches you that everyone bleeds the same. Everyone cries the same. Everyone dies the same." They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Iana stood and gestured for her sister to follow. "We will take turns keeping watch." She said to Samuel, "You should sleep. Tomorrow will be difficult. Our father does not trust white men. Even those who come to help, you will be tested." Samuel nodded, understanding that the real challenge still lay ahead. Buying the medicine had been the easy part. Entering an Apache camp and facing a chief who had every reason to hate settlers would require courage of a different kind. He lay down near the fire, using his saddle as a pillow. But sleep did not come easily. His mind kept turning over everything that could go wrong. The chief might see his presence as an insult or a trick. The warriors might decide that one dead white man was worth more than the medicine he brought. Samuel might never leave that camp alive. But as he finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, Samuel realized something important for the first time since the war ended. He was doing something that mattered. He was not just surviving, not just going through the motions of life. He was making a choice that could save a young man's life. and perhaps build a bridge between two peoples who desperately needed to stop killing each other. When Samuel woke just before dawn, he found Kiona sitting by the fire, sharpening her knife on a smooth stone. She looked up as he stirred. "Ayanna is scouting ahead," she said. "She wants to make sure the path to our village is safe." Samuel sat up and rubbed the sleep from his eyes. His body ached from sleeping on the hard ground, but his mind felt clear and focused. "Kiona," he said, "when we reach your village, what should I do? How should I act?" The Apache woman studied him for a moment, then said, "Do not show fear. My father respects courage. Do not speak unless spoken to. Let Ayanna and me explain why we brought you, and most important," she paused, making sure Samuel was listening carefully. "Do not touch your weapon, no matter what happens if you reach for your gun. You will die before your hand reaches the grip." Samuel nodded, understanding the gravity of her warning. "I will remember," he said. Ayanna returned as the sun was rising. "The path is clear," she reported. "We can reach the village within 2 hours. But I must warn you, Samuel Hawkins, what you are about to see must remain secret. If you tell other white men where our village is hidden, you will bring death to everyone you meet today, including yourself." "I understand," Samuel said. "I will take the location to my grave." "Let us hope that grave is many years away," Ayanna replied, a hint of humor in her voice. They broke camp quickly, covering all signs of the fire and their presence. Samuel mounted his horse while the sisters took up positions on either side. They moved through a narrow pass between two high cliffs, then descended into a hidden valley where a clear stream ran between stands of cottonwood and willow trees. As they emerged from the tree line, Samuel saw the Apache village spread out before him. There were perhaps 30 dwellings made of brush and animal skins, smoke rising from cooking fires, children playing near the stream, women working on hides and baskets, and warriors standing guard at strategic points around the perimeter. The moment Samuel and the sisters entered the village, everything stopped. The children quit playing and stared. The women stopped their work and reached for weapons. The warriors moved forward with bows drawn and rifles ready. Samuel felt dozens of eyes on him, most filled with hatred and suspicion. A tall man emerged from the largest dwelling. He wore the bearing of a leader, his face weathered by years of sun and struggle, his eyes sharp and intelligent. This was the chief, Samuel realized, the father of Ayanna, Kiona, and Nahale, the man who would decide whether Samuel lived or died. Ayanna stepped forward and spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing toward Samuel and holding up the bottle of quinine. The chief listened without expression, his face giving nothing away. When Ayanna finished speaking, the chief walked slowly toward Samuel, stopping just a few feet away. "You are the man with the scar," the chief said in surprisingly good English, the man Diego Santos spoke of. "I am," Samuel replied, keeping his voice steady and meeting the chief's gaze without flinching. The chief studied him for a long moment, then said, "Diego Santos told me you were a fool. A white man who valued honor more than survival. He said I could trust you." The chief's expression hardened. "I do not trust easily. Let us see if Diego was right. Or if he was the fool, Samuel's fate, and perhaps the fate of young Nahal, hung in the balance as the entire Apache village waited to see what would happen next." The chief's words hung in the air like smoke from a ceremonial fire. Samuel stood perfectly still, aware that every warrior in the village had a weapon trained on him. One wrong word, one gesture that could be interpreted as hostile, and he would be dead before he hit the ground. "I bring medicine for your son," Samuel said, keeping his voice respectful but firm. "Quinine from the town of Dry Creek. Ayanna and Kiona told me that Noel has the shaking fever. Without treatment, he will not survive." The chief's expression remained unreadable. "Many white men bring gifts before they bring soldiers," he said. Many white men smile and speak of peace before they bring fire and death. Why should I believe you are different? Samuel understood the chief's suspicion, the history between Apache people and white settlers was written in blood and betrayal. Treaties broken, promises abandoned, families destroyed. You should not trust me, Samuel admitted. You do not know me, but Diego Santos knows me, and he sent your daughters to my ranch. Diego believed I would help if you do not trust me. At least trust his judgment. The chief studied Samuel for a long moment. Then turned to Ayanna. Show me the medicine, he commanded in English, clearly wanting Samuel to understand every word. Ayanna took the bottle of quinine from Samuel's pocket and handed it to her father. The chief examined it carefully, turning the bottle in his hands, reading the label. How do I know this is medicine and not poison? He asked. You do not. Samuel replied honestly, but I will take the first dose myself, right here, right now. If it is poison, I will die in front of you, and you will know the truth. A murmur ran through the assembled warriors. Some looked impressed by Samuel's courage. Others remained suspicious. The chief's eyes narrowed. That would prove nothing. He said, Poison can be slow. You could leave here and die tomorrow. And my son would already be dead. Samuel felt sweat trickling down his back despite the cool morning air. The chief was testing him, pushing to see if his courage would hold. Then asked the medicine man to examine it, Samuel suggested. Your people have healers who understand plants and remedies. Let them determine if this medicine is safe. The chief considered this. Then nodded. He spoke rapidly in Apache, and an elderly man emerged from one of the dwellings. The medicine man was small and wizened, his face deeply lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. He wore a necklace of eagle feathers and carried a bundle wrapped in deerskin. The medicine man took the bottle and opened it, examining the tablets inside. He smelled them, touched one to his tongue, closed his eyes as if listening to voices Samuel could not hear. The entire village waited in silence, watching the old healer work. Finally, the medicine man spoke in Apache, his voice surprisingly strong for someone so ancient. The chief listened carefully, then turned back to Samuel. He says the medicine is powerful, that it fights the fever spirit. He says it will help Nahal, but only if it is given properly. Relief flooded through Samuel, but he kept his face neutral. I know how to administer quinine, he said. I treated soldiers with fever during the war. The dose must be precise. Too little, and it will not work. Too much, and it can cause harm. Then you will give the medicine to my son, the chief said. And it was not a request, if Nahal lives. You will have the gratitude of the Mescalero people. If he dies, the chief paused, his eyes hard as stone. You will die with him, slowly and painfully. So that you understand what it means to fail a father who has lost too much already. Samuel felt his stomach tighten, but he nodded. I understand, he said. Take me to Noel. The chief turned and walked toward one of the larger dwellings. Samuel followed, with Ayanna and Kiona close behind. Warriors fell in around them, forming an escort that was both protective and threatening. Samuel was being given a chance, but he was also a prisoner inside the dwelling. The air was thick with smoke from a small fire. The smell of sage and other herbs filled Samuel's nostrils. Making him slightly dizzy, a young man lay on a bed of blankets and furs. His body shaking violently despite the warmth of the fire, Samuel knelt beside Nahal and placed his hand on the boy's forehead. The fever was intense, burning like a furnace. Nahal's eyes were closed, his breathing rapid and shallow. He was deep in the grip of malaria, lost in fever dreams. How long has he been like this? Samuel asked. 5 days, Ayanna answered, her voice tight with worry. The fever grows worse each day. Last night, he did not recognize us. Samuel pulled out the bottle of quinine and carefully measured out the proper dose. We need clean water, he said, and we need to bring the fever down before we give him the medicine. His body is too hot." Kiona disappeared and returned moments later with a clay pot filled with cool water from the stream. Samuel tore strips from his own shirt and soaked them in the water, then placed them on Neo's forehead, neck, and chest. The boy moaned, but did not wake. "This will take time," Samuel explained to the chief, who stood watching with arms crossed. "The fever must come down first. Then we can start the quinine treatment. It will take several days before we see improvement. Then you will stay here." The chief said, "You will not leave my son's side until he is well or dead." Samuel nodded. Accepting his fate, he had committed himself to this path, and now he had to see it through for the next 3 hours. Samuel worked tirelessly to bring Niall's fever down. He changed the cool compresses every few minutes, coaxed water between the boy's cracked lips, monitored his breathing and pulse. The medicine man sat nearby, chanting softly and burning sacred herbs. Ayana and Kiona helped, following Samuel's instructions without question. They had seen white men treat their brother with contempt, had watched settlers refuse medicine to Apache people out of pure hatred. Now they witnessed a white man fighting to save their brother's life with the same intensity that a father would show for his own son. As the sun reached its peak, Niall's fever finally broke enough for Samuel to administer the first dose of quinine. He dissolved the tablet in water and carefully spooned it into the boy's mouth. Making sure he swallowed, Niall grimaced at the bitter taste but kept it down. "The medicine is strong," Samuel said. "It will make him feel worse before he feels better. His stomach may rebel. He may have headaches and ringing in his ears. But these are signs that the medicine is working, fighting the fever spirit." The chief nodded. Understanding he had seen enough illness and death to know that healing was rarely easy or comfortable. As evening approached, the village began to settle into its nightly rhythms. Cooking fires were lit. Children were called in from playing. Warriors changed guard positions, but in the chief's dwelling, time seemed to stand still as everyone waited to see if the medicine would work. Samuel gave Nahale a second dose at sunset. The boy was still unconscious, but his breathing had become more regular. The violent shaking had lessened. These were good signs. But Samuel knew it was too early to celebrate. Malaria was unpredictable. The fever could return with renewed strength. The medicine man approached Samuel and spoke in Apache Ayana. Translated, "He says you have strong medicine, that the spirits respect your healing touch. He wants to know where you learned these ways." "I learned in war," Samuel answered. "I learned by watching men die when medicine came too late. I learned by watching men live when treatment came in time." War is a cruel teacher, but an effective one. The medicine man nodded, seeming to understand. He reached into his bundle and pulled out a small pouch. He opened it and sprinkled something over Naor's body while chanting softly. Samuel recognized the yellow powder as cattail pollen. "Sacred to Apache people, he is blessing your medicine," Ayana explained. Combining the white man's healing with Apache spiritual power, this way, both worlds work together to save Nail. Samuel felt a strange emotion rising in his chest. Here, in this Apache village, surrounded by people who had every reason to hate him, he was witnessing something profound. Two different approaches to healing, two different cultures, coming together for a single purpose, to save one young man's life. The chief sat down across from Samuel, his stern expression softening slightly. "You could have refused my daughters," he said quietly. "You could have turned them away from your well, sent them into the desert to die. Many white men would have done this without hesitation." "Many white men are fools," Samuel replied. "They see enemies where they should see people. They see differences where they should see common ground. I am tired of hate and violence. I have seen enough of it to last 10 lifetimes. The chief was silent for a moment, then said, "Diego Santos told me about the burning building. How you carried him out while bullets flew around you like angry wasps. He said you told your commanding officer that you would not leave a man behind, even an Apache scout, even when they threatened to court-martial you. Samuel nodded, remembering that terrible day. Diego was a good scout and a good man. That was reason enough. My people judge a man by his actions, not his words. The chief said, your actions today speak of honor. If Noel lives, you will always be welcome in this village. You will have the protection of every Mescalero warrior. We will defend you as we would defend our own blood. And if he dies, Samuel asked. The chief's face hardened again. Then neither of us will have to worry about the future, he said simply. Samuel understood if Noel died. Samuel would die with him, but strangely, he felt no fear. Only a deep sense of purpose for the first time since the war ended. He was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do as night fell over the Apache village. Samuel continued his vigil beside Nail's bed, giving medicine at the prescribed intervals, monitoring every breath. Every heartbeat. Outside, warriors stood guard, protecting their chief's son and watching the white man who held that son's life in his hands. In the darkness, surrounded by people who were strangers just days ago, Samuel finally understood what Diego had tried to tell him years before. Every person who chooses life over death, peace over violence, is a small victory against the darkness, and sometimes those small victories are enough to change everything. 3 days had passed since Samuel first administered the quinine to Nahel, and the young man's condition hung in a delicate balance. The fever had broken twice, only to return with renewed fury each time. Samuel barely slept, constantly monitoring his patient, adjusting doses, using every technique he had learned during the war to keep death at bay. The Apache village had settled into an uneasy routine around Samuel's presence. Some warriors still watched him with suspicion, their hands never far from their weapons. But others had begun to nod respectfully when they passed, acknowledging his dedication to saving the chief's son. The women brought food and fresh water without being asked, and the children no longer ran away when they saw him on the morning of the 4th day. Samuel woke from a brief nap to find the medicine man sitting beside Nahal's bed. The old healer was chanting softly, his voice like wind through canyon walls. He held a bundle of sage and was waving the smoke over Nawal's body. Combining Apache spiritual healing with the white man's medicine, Samuel watched in respectful silence. He had learned during his vigil that the medicine man's name was Nantan, which meant spokesman in Apache. Nantan had been with the tribe for more than 70 winters, had seen the best and worst of both Apache and white cultures, and commanded respect from everyone in the village. When Nantan finished his ceremony, he turned to Samuel and spoke in slow, careful English. "The boy fights," he said. "His spirit is strong, but the fever demon is also strong. They battle inside him like two warriors locked in combat. The medicine is working," Samuel assured him. "But it takes time. The quinine must build up in his blood, must reach every part of his body where the fever hides." Nantan nodded. "Your medicine is powerful," he said. "But medicine alone cannot save him. He must also want to live, must have a reason to fight." The old man's eyes grew distant. "I have seen many young warriors lose this battle, not because their bodies were weak, but because their spirits had given up." Samuel understood what Nantan was saying. He had seen the same thing in the war, soldiers who survived terrible wounds because they had something to live for, and soldiers who died from minor injuries because they had lost hope. "Does Nahel have a reason to fight?" Samuel asked. The medicine man smiled slightly. "He has sisters who would walk through fire for him," he said. "He has a father who loves him, even though that love is hard and demanding. And now he has a white man who risked everything to bring him medicine." Nantan paused. "That is much to live for," as if in response to their words. Nahale stirred, his eyes fluttered open for the first time in days. They were glazed with fever, unfocused, but they were open. Samuel immediately moved to his side, checking his pulse, feeling his forehead. "Noel," Samuel said softly, "can you hear me?" The young man's lips moved, forming words that were barely whispers. Ayanna, who had been sleeping in the corner, was instantly awake and at her brother's side. She spoke to him in Apache, her voice trembling with hope. Nali's eyes found his sister's face, and a weak smile crossed his lips. He whispered something that made Ayanna laugh and cry at the same time. She turned to Samuel, tears streaming down her face. "He says he is thirsty," she said. "He wants water." It was a simple request. But Samuel knew it was a breakthrough. Noel was conscious, aware, asking for something. These were signs that the medicine was finally winning the battle against the fever. Samuel prepared a cup of water, mixed with a small dose of quinine, and helped Nahale drink. The young man grimaced at the bitter taste. "Tastes like death," he whispered in surprisingly good English. Samuel laughed, relief flooding through him. "It tastes like life," he corrected. "And you need to keep drinking it for several more days." Word of Nahale's awakening spread through the village like wildfire. Within minutes, the dwelling was filled with people. The chief pushed through the crowd and knelt beside his son. His stern face cracked with emotion as he placed his hand on Nalal's forehead. Feeling for himself that the fever had truly diminished, the chief spoke to his son in Apache, his voice rough with feelings he usually kept hidden. Nahal responded weakly, and Samuel could see the love between father and son despite the tension that Ayanna had described. Whatever their differences, they were family. Bound by blood and loyalty, the chief stood and turned to Samuel. "You have done what I thought impossible," he said. "You have saved my son when our own medicine could not." The Mescalero people do not forget such debts. Samuel felt the weight of exhaustion finally catching up with him. "I did what any man would do," he said. "No," the chief replied firmly. "You did what few men would do. You risked your life, your reputation, everything you own for people you did not know, for a boy you had never met. That is not common. That is extraordinary." Nanten stood and raised his arms, calling for silence. The crowded dwelling grew quiet as the medicine man began to speak in Apache. His voice carried the authority of age and wisdom, and everyone listened with reverence when he finished. A murmur of approval ran through the assembled warriors and women. Kiona translated for Samuel. "The medicine man says you must be given an Apache name," she explained. "He says you are no longer just a white rancher, but a bridge between two peoples. He names you Nach, which means mischief maker, because you have disrupted expectations, proved the doubters wrong, and created possibilities where none existed before." Samuel felt honored and humbled. A name was sacred to Apache people, a gift not given lightly. "I accept this name with gratitude," he said. The chief gestured for everyone to leave, giving his son space to rest as the dwelling emptied. He asked Samuel, Ayanna, Kiona, and Nanten to remain. "We must speak of what comes next," the chief said, his face serious again. Samuel knew this conversation was inevitable. He had saved Nahale. But that raised new questions and challenges. "What happens now?" he asked. The chief sat down. Gesturing for the others to do the same, "You have proven yourself worthy of trust," he said. But trust is fragile, like ice on a spring river. One wrong step and everything breaks. He looked directly at Samuel. "Can you keep the location of this village secret? Even if other white men torture you for information, I give you my word," Samuel said. "I would die before revealing this place." "Words are easy," the chief replied. "What guarantee do I have?" Samuel thought carefully before answering. "You have my life," he said finally. "If this village is ever attacked, if soldiers or settlers find this place, you will know I betrayed you. And I give you permission to hunt me down and kill me. Along with anyone I love, make this known to all Apache tribes. Let it be understood that my life is forfeit if I break my word." The chief studied Samuel for a long moment, then nodded. "That is a worthy guarantee," he said. "I accept it." Nantan spoke up. "There is more to discuss," he said. "The boy will live, but he will be weak for many weeks. He cannot ride, cannot hunt, cannot train as a warrior. What will become of him?" The chief's face hardened. "He will train when he is strong enough," he said. "He is my son. He must be a warrior." No, Nahal's weak voice came from the bed. Everyone turned to look at the young man who had been listening despite his exhaustion. "I do not want to be a warrior, father. I want to be a storyteller. A keeper of our people's history." The chief's jaw clenched, and Samuel could see the anger rising in him. But before the chief could speak, Nantan raised his hand. "The boy nearly died," the medicine man said quietly. "Perhaps that gives him the right to choose his own path. A chief's son does not have that luxury," the chief argued. "Our people need strong leaders, warriors who can defend them." Ayana found her courage and spoke. "Our people also need those who can preserve our stories," she said. "Those who can teach the children who we are, where we came from, why we fight. Warriors die, father, but stories live forever." The chief looked around at the faces surrounding him. His son who refused to be what he wanted. His daughters who defended that son's choice. The medicine man who suggested compromise. And the white rancher who had proven that courage came in many forms. Samuel decided to speak, knowing he was walking on dangerous ground. "With respect, chief," he said, "I have seen many young men forced to be soldiers when they wanted to be farmers or teachers or artists. I have seen what it does to them. How it breaks their spirits, even when their bodies survive. Your son is brave, but his bravery may lie in a different direction than yours." The chief stood abruptly, and for a moment Samuel thought he had gone too far. But then the chief walked to the opening of the dwelling and stood looking out at his village, at the children playing, the women working, the warriors training, all the life that depended on his leadership and wisdom. When he turned back, his face was still stern. But something had shifted in his eyes. "Nile will recover his strength first," he said. "When he is well, we will discuss his future. I make no promises, but I will listen to his arguments." He looked at his son. "You must prove that your path serves our people as well as the warrior's path does." Nail nodded weakly. "I will, father," he promised. The chief turned to Samuel. "You should rest," he said. "You have not slept properly in 4 days. Tonight there will be a ceremony in your honor. The warriors will dance, and you will be formally recognized as a friend of the Mescalero people." Samuel felt overwhelmed. "That is not necessary," he said. "It is absolutely necessary," the chief replied. "Our people must know that not all white men are enemies, that some can be trusted. You are living proof that bridges can be built if both sides are willing to walk halfway." As Samuel finally left the dwelling to find a place to rest, he was stopped by Kiona. "Thank you," she said simply. "You gave us back our brother. You gave me back my purpose," Samuel replied. "I think we are even." That evening, as the sun set over the hidden valley, Samuel witnessed something few white men had ever seen. The Gan dancers, also called mountain spirit dancers, performed their sacred ceremony. Warriors painted in elaborate designs, wore tall wooden headdresses, and moved around the fire with otherworldly grace. Their movements told stories older than memory, of spirits and heroes, of creation and survival. Samuel sat beside the chief, watching the dancers weave their magic. He thought about how far he had come. From a broken soldier contemplating death to a man honored by people he had been taught to hate. He thought about Diego Santos, whose faith in him had started this entire journey. And he thought about the future, uncertain and dangerous, but filled with possibility. The ceremony lasted deep into the night, and when it finally ended, Samuel felt something he had not felt in years. He felt like he belonged somewhere, like he mattered, like his life had meaning beyond simple survival. As he prepared to sleep that night, wrapped in a blanket under the stars, Samuel knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. He would have to return to his ranch, face questions from suspicious settlers, navigate the dangerous waters between two worlds at war. But tonight, surrounded by the sounds of an Apache village settling into sleep, Samuel felt at peace. He had saved a life, built a bridge, and proven that even in the darkest times, there was room for compassion, honor, and hope. Samuel left the Apache village 5 days after Nile's fever broke. His departure was bittersweet, filled with farewells that felt more like promises than goodbyes. The chief presented him with a turquoise stone on a leather cord, a sacred symbol of protection and friendship among the Mescalero people. "This marks you as under our protection," the chief said, placing it around Samuel's neck. "Any Apache who sees this will know you are friend, not enemy." Nale, still weak but recovering, had insisted on standing to say goodbye. "You gave me back my life," the young man said, his voice stronger than it had been days before. "I will not waste it. I will become the storyteller I was meant to be. And your story will be the first I tell." Ayanna and Kiona walked with Samuel to the edge of the valley, guiding him through the hidden paths that would lead back to his ranch. "You are our brother now," Ayanna said, "not by blood, but by choice." "That is even stronger." The journey back to his ranch took 2 days, and Samuel used the time to think about everything that had happened. He had gone to help 2 desperate sisters and ended up finding something he did not know he was searching for: purpose, connection, a place in the world that made sense. But as his small cabin came into view, Samuel felt a knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. The real test was about to begin. Living with the Mescalero in their hidden valley was one thing, but maintaining that alliance while living among white settlers who hated Apache people would require a different kind of courage. Samuel had been home less than an hour when he heard horses approaching. He walked outside to see Marshal Briggs from Dry Creek riding up with 2 deputized settlers. The marshal's face was stern, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Samuel Hawkins," the marshal said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we need to talk about where you have been for the past week." Samuel's heart raced, but he kept his voice calm. "I have been at my ranch, Marshal, tending to my business that is interesting," Briggs replied. "Because Thompson here," he gestured to one of the deputies, "says he saw you ride out of Dry Creek, heading east. Same direction as that Apache village everyone has been trying to find." Samuel felt the weight of the turquoise stone beneath his shirt. "Hidden but present, I rode east to check my fence lines," he said. Nothing more. The marshal dismounted and walked slowly around Samuel's property, his eyes taking in every detail. "You bought quinine from Thornton," he said. "Enough to treat fever for a week. You sick?" "Samuel, precaution," Samuel answered. "Man lives alone. He needs to be prepared." Briggs stopped and stared directly at Samuel. "Here is what I think happened," he said. "I think those Apache sisters everyone has been seeing around these parts came to you. I think they convinced you to help them with something. And I think you are hiding it." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "If you are helping Apache, Samuel, that makes you a traitor. And we hang traitors in these parts." Samuel met the marshal's gaze without flinching. "I am no traitor," he said firmly. "I am a rancher trying to survive in a hard land. If Apache people came to my well for water, I gave it to them, same as I would for any thirsty person. That does not make me their ally." The tension stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Finally, the marshal stepped back. "I am going to be watching you, Hawkins," he said. "One sign that you are working with Apache, one hint of betrayal. And I will come back here with a rope." The three men mounted their horses and rode away. Leaving Samuel standing in the dust, he waited until they were out of sight. Then went inside his cabin and sat down heavily. His hands were shaking. He had just lied to a lawman, had committed himself to a path that could get him killed by both sides. But as the days turned into weeks, Samuel found a rhythm to his new life. He worked his ranch during the day, tending cattle, mending fences, doing all the normal tasks of a frontier rancher. But twice a month, when the moon was new and darkness was deepest, Ayana or Kiona would appear at his well. They would share news, exchange information about movements of soldiers or hostile settlers, and occasionally bring small gifts from the tribe, woven baskets, tanned hides, medicines made from desert plants. Samuel, in turn, would warn them when army patrols were heading toward the mountains, or when bounty hunters were in the area asking about Apache camps. He became a bridge between two worlds, protecting both sides from unnecessary bloodshed. 3 months after Niall's recovery, Samuel was working in his barn when he heard a commotion outside. He grabbed his rifle and rushed out to find a group of Mescalero warriors surrounding his property. For a moment, fear gripped him, thinking something had gone wrong, that the alliance had broken. But then the warriors parted, and Nahala rode forward on a painted horse. The young man looked healthy and strong, a dramatic change from the fever-racked boy Samuel had last seen. Behind him rode the chief, Ayana, Kiona, and Nantan, the medicine man. "Samuel Hawkins, called Nach by our people," the chief announced formally. "We come to honor a debt and to make an offer." Samuel lowered his rifle. "You owe me nothing," he said. "I did what was right, nevertheless." "We offer payment," the chief continued. He gestured, and 2 warriors led forward 3 beautiful horses, strong and well-trained. "These are from our best stock," the chief said. "They are yours." Along with our continued protection, Samuel was overwhelmed. Horses of this quality were worth more than everything he owned. "This is too generous," he protested. Niall dismounted and walked over to Samuel. "It is not just for saving my life," the young man said. "It is for showing me that I could choose my own path. I am training to be our tribe's memory keeper now, learning the old stories and creating new ones." He smiled. "And I am teaching our children to speak English, so that when peace finally comes, we can talk to white people without misunderstanding. Peace may be a long way off," Samuel said sadly. "All journeys begin with a single step," Nantan said, speaking up from his horse. "You took that step when you chose to help instead of harm. Others will follow. Slowly, perhaps. But they will follow." The chief dismounted and stood before Samuel. "We also come with a warning," he said, his voice serious. "There is a group of white men planning to attack Apache camps. They are gathering weapons and recruiting fighters in Dry Creek and other towns. They plan to strike within the month." Samuel's blood ran cold. "How many men?" he asked. "Perhaps 50, the chief replied, led by a man named Carver, a former army captain who hates our people. He is telling settlers that the only good Apache is a dead Apache." Samuel knew Carver by reputation, a brutal man who had been dishonorably discharged from the army for excessive violence. "What will you do?" he asked. "We will prepare to defend ourselves," the chief said. "But we also wanted to warn you, when the fighting starts, you will be suspected of helping us. Carver and his men may come for you first. To eliminate the one white man they know has contact with Apache people." Samuel understood by helping the Mescalero. He had painted a target on his back. "So be it," he said. "I will not hide from who I have become." Ayana dismounted and walked to Samuel. "You could come with us," she said. "Live in the village where you would be safe. You are already one of us in spirit. Why not in body as well? It was a tempting offer. Samuel thought about the loneliness of his ranch, the constant suspicion from other settlers, the isolation of living between two worlds. But he shook his head. I can do more good here, he said. If I abandon my ranch, it proves to everyone that I chose Apache over white. It makes the division worse, but if I stay, if I keep trying to build bridges, maybe others will see that it is possible. The chief nodded with respect. You are braver than most warriors, he said. To stand alone in the middle ground takes more courage than to pick a side and fight before they left. Nanten performed a blessing ceremony, burning sage and sprinkling cattail pollen around Samuel's property. This will protect you, the old medicine man said, not from bullets or knives, but from the darkness that eats at men's souls when they forget their humanity, as the Apache group prepared to leave. Nahale gave Samuel a gift. It was a small leather book, handmade, filled with blank pages. For your own stories, the young man said, write down what happens, so that future generations will know that not all white men and Apache were enemies, that some chose a different path. Samuel accepted the book with gratitude. I will write it all, he promised. The good and the bad, the hope and the fear, all of it. The mescalero rode away, disappearing into the desert landscape like shadows at noon. Samuel stood watching until they were gone, then looked down at the leather book in his hands. He opened it to the first page and began to write. My name is Samuel Hawkins, but the Apache call me Nage. This is the story of how two sisters saved my life by asking me to save their brothers. It is a story of trust earned and bridges built, of courage found in unexpected places, and of hope surviving in the darkest times over the following weeks. Samuel continued his double life. He kept his ranch running, maintained minimal contact with suspicious settlers, and provided intelligence to the mescalero about Carver's growing army of Apache hunters. The tension built like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Then, one night, Samuel was awakened by the sound of horses surrounding his cabin. He grabbed his rifle and peered through the window to see torches blazing in the darkness. At least 20 men sat on horses, and at their head was Carver, a large man with a scarred face and eyes full of hate. Samuel Hawkins, Carver's voice boomed. Come out here. We know you have been helping the Apache. We know you are a traitor to your own people. Samuel's heart pounded, but he opened the door and stepped out. Rifle in hand, I am no traitor, he said. I am a man trying to prevent unnecessary killing. That is the talk of a coward and a traitor, Carver spat. We came to give you one chance. Join us in wiping out the Apache, or die with them. Samuel looked at the faces of the men surrounding him. Some he recognized from Dry Creek. Ordinary settlers driven by fear and hatred, others were rough men, bounty hunters and criminals who saw Apache hunting as profitable sport. I will not join you, Samuel said firmly. Killing innocent people is not justice. It is murder. Carver smiled coldly. Then you have chosen death, he said, raising his hand to signal his men to fire. But before anyone could pull a trigger, the night exploded with movement. Apache warriors emerged from the darkness. They had been watching Samuel's ranch. Anticipating this exact scenario, they surrounded Carver's group, appearing like ghosts with arrows nocked and rifles aimed. The chief rode forward, his face painted for war. You are on neutral ground, he announced in clear English. This man, Samuel Hawkins, is under the protection of the mescalero people. If you harm him, you declare war not just on him, but on our entire tribe. The standoff was tense. Carver's men looked nervous, suddenly realizing they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Carver himself looked around wildly, his confidence shaken. This does not end here, Carver threatened. But his voice lacked conviction. No, it does not, the chief agreed. It ends when men like you learn that peace is possible. Or when men like you are buried in the ground you fought over. The choice is yours. Carver and his men slowly backed away, then turned and rode hard toward Dry Creek. The Apache warriors melted back into the darkness as quickly as they had appeared. Only the chief remained, walking his horse up to where Samuel stood. "Thank you," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "You stood alone when you could have run," the chief replied. "You chose principle over safety that is worthy of protection." He looked at Samuel seriously. "But this is not over. Carver will return with more men." "You cannot stay here. I will not abandon my ranch," Samuel insisted. The chief smiled slightly. "I did not say abandon. I said you cannot stay alone," he gestured. And Ayanna and Kiona appeared from the shadows. "My daughters have volunteered to stay with you. To watch your back and guard your property, other warriors will patrol nearby. You will never be alone again." Samuel felt tears prickling his eyes. He had started this journey alone, a broken soldier with nothing to live for. Now he had a family that was not bound by blood, but by something stronger: choice, honor, and mutual respect. Over the following months, an uneasy peace settled over the region. Carver's raid never materialized. The Apache presence around Samuel's ranch was too strong, too organized. Word spread among the settlers that attacking Samuel Hawkins meant facing the entire Mescalero tribe. Most people decided it was not worth the risk. Samuel's ranch became something unique on the frontier, a place where Apache and white people could meet without violence, where trade could happen, where small acts of trust could grow into something larger. It was not perfect, and it was not easy, but it was possible years later, after Noel had become the tribe's official storyteller and historian. He would tell the tale of the white rancher who pretended to sleep to test two Apache sisters, of how that act of listening had saved a life and built a bridge. He told it to Apache children around campfires and two white children in schoolhouses, wherever people would listen, and in his own leather book. Samuel wrote the story faithfully, preserving every detail for future generations. He ended his account with these words: "Trust is a fragile thing, easily broken and hard to repair, but when it is built on truth, courage, and mutual respect, it can bridge any divide, even the divide between enemies." I learned this from two Apache sisters who came to my well seeking water and gave me back my life in return. My name is Samuel Hawkins, called Nate by the Mescalero people. And this is my testimony that peace is always possible when good people choose courage over fear. The story of the rancher and the Apache sisters became legend, passed down through generations as proof that even in the darkest times, humanity could triumph over hate, and the unbreakable bond forged in those desperate days endured. A testament to what is possible when people dare to see each other not as enemies, but as fellow human beings deserving of compassion, dignity, and respect.